Welcome back, everybody. Today, I wanted to go over a trade deadline review, but not for the entire NHL. I'm going to do that in my podcast tomorrow. Instead, I'm going to be just going over the Tampa Bay Lightning's trade deadline. Now, I'm a fan of the Lightning, so I wanted to do this, make this quick video. And we're going to start with the, smaller trade they made on trade deadline day. So, Tampa Bay traded away Magnus Krona, who was a 5th-round pick in 2018. So far, this season, in 18 games played, he had 7 wins, 11 losses, 0 overtime losses or shootout losses, a .907 save percentage, and a 2.47 goals against average for the University of Denver. And Krona is a guy who, 20 years old now, could have that upside. I see him being more of maybe a backup level goaltender in the NHL if he makes it, but still a goalie prospect that we traded away. I really expected us to go after a backup goalie after freeing up that goalie slot, but we did not. I was really hoping for Jonathan Bernier. That would have been awesome. Linus Ullmark, just anyone, even like a James Reimer from Carolina or something. But didn't make any goalie moves, which I'm pretty disappointed with, but what can you do? And as I said, Magnus Krona is 20 years old. In return for Krona, we decided to load up on a depth defenseman, and we got Frederick Klason from the San Jose Sharks. And in 4 NHL games this year, he has no points. He's a +1 with no penalty minutes, and he is 28 years old. He'll probably be a AHL defenseman for us for now. But, a good depth defenseman to bring up if we need to. He has the NHL experience, and he's pretty decent. I can see why they made this move come playoff time. That defensive depth is going to be super important. But I really think you need to get an extra goalie, because if Vasilevsky goes down, then what are you going to do? Like, Curtis McElhinney is not going to be able to bring this team into a playoff run. It's just not going to happen. So, I'm fine with this trade. I saw why they did it at the time, but now looking back at it, I just don't see a reason for it, especially considering the other trade that Tampa Bay made. I don't see a reason for this trade to happen at all. It's just trading away assets for no particular reason. And now we got the big trade that Tampa made. And yes, I got my book for my podcast tomorrow. I got everything I need in here. So, here we go. This is one of a few 3-team trades that were made over the past week, and this one involves Tampa, Columbus, and Detroit. So let's start with what Detroit acquires, because they're just the third team in this, the bottom feeder. Basically, Detroit acquires a 4th-round pick in 2021. Nothing special, just a pick in a weak draft. And what Detroit gives up to Tampa Bay is Brian Lashof, who in 13 games played in the AHL for Grand Rapids, he has 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points. He's a +5 and 6 penalty minutes, and he is 30 years old. So a guy who was drafted, I believe, in the 4th round in 2009, 2010. He's okay. He's another depth defenseman for Tampa to call up if they need. A guy who has NHL experience. And it's just kind of another Frederick Klason, except I'd much rather give up a 4th-round pick than a potential goalie prospect who may make or break it one day. And I know we have Hugo Alnefelt, but it's never bad to load up on goalie prospects, never. And so now let's get what Columbus and Tampa did. So Columbus acquires a 1st in 2021 and a 3rd in 2022, which... This is the 4th year in a row where Tampa does not have a 1st-round pick. I'm hoping that that changes next year, because there's a lot better players next year than this year. But I still like a lot of the guys who Tampa could acquire this year late in the draft, late in the 1st round, like maybe a Sasha Pastuchov, a Fyodor Zvechkov, Nikita Chibrikov, a Daniil Chaika. There's options there for them, and it's a weak draft, so you trade your 1st-round pick. It's not a big deal, but in return, we get David Savard from the Columbus Blue Jackets, and this guy Savard's is already now our best right-handed shot defenseman. You could make a case that Eric Chernak and David Savard are kind of on the same level, but I think David Savard is more dominant defensively now. Savard is having the worst season of his career, analytics-wise, and that does partially have to do with him being on a really bad Columbus team, but you might say that he might be regressing already, which is a little bit disappointing to me. I would have been comfortable giving up a second and a third for Savard, or maybe a second and a third in a guy like Taylor Radish or Boris Kachuk. I could see that, but I hate trading first-round picks. Like, it just bothers me because we don't have a first-round quality player in the last 4 drafts, and that's really not good for the future. But 40 games played so far for Columbus, 1 goal, 5 assists for 6 points. He's a -19 and has 24 penalty minutes, and he as well is 30 years old. And again, this is a fine trade. David Savard adds some great defensive help for us come playoff time. And you know what? I don't really mind this trade 100%. Like, it's not the trade I really wanted to happen, but come playoff time, I may be thanking Julien Brisebois for this again, just like last year where he got Coleman and Goudreau for some physicality and some depth scoring. That really helped out in the playoff run. David Savard could be a guy who really helps out in this playoff run, especially with teams like Colorado and Vegas and Toronto loading up a lot more than Tampa Bay did. Those teams getting some really decent guys in there for that playoff run, especially Toronto. This might actually be Toronto's year, and I'm not afraid to admit that anymore. They have a super good team heading into the playoffs. They have that, they have that grittiness now that I think they lacked in the years prior, which is why Boston beat them. But overall, adding 3 defensemen at this trade deadline, I think it's fine for Tampa, and I think, it's I didn't expect this to happen, but it is better than doing nothing, I think, even if we give up a lot of picks in the process, and it's a little bit unnecessary loading up on two depth defensemen and David Savard. And just giving up Magnus Krona, I kind of have an issue with. But yeah, if you're a Lightning fan and you're watching this and you agree with what I have to say, then yeah, I think getting a backup goalie was super important at this trade deadline, and that didn't happen. I think Julien Brisebois really tempting fate with having Vasilevsky not go down with an injury, which I wouldn't personally take the chance on, especially with what kind of season he's having. He's literally the reason why Tampa's keeping up with teams like Florida and Carolina, because they're playing out of their minds, and Tampa is kind of struggling right now. I'm not afraid to say that either. They're not playing like a Stanley Cup contender. Their goalie is, and their goalie's carrying them there. So thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please consider liking, please consider subscribing. I might do a couple more trade deadline reviews for, like, Arizona, let's say. Well, no, Arizona didn't make any moves, so why would I make one for them? But for maybe Toronto and other teams throughout this next week, just because, you know what, Tampa's not really the only team I want to talk about, but I also want to talk about teams who are also on the fringe of making maybe playoff contention, or teams that really didn't do anything and, why they should have. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.